Hello, WIDR listeners. It's once again that time of the week. What time of the week is it? Well, it's that time of the week where I come onto your radio dial, me and sometimes my co-hosts, and we talk about what is going on here in the community of ours, as well as what's going on at the county-wide, statewide, national, and international level from the perspective of some broke-ass activist types who wants to call out the establishment on its BS. It is Media Cyphers, show where we dig underneath the headlines and try to tell y'all out there what is really going on. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 FM, WIDR Kalamazoo, or Western Michigan University, no matter how dope or insightful they may turn out to be. Well, a lot of us are just coming back from Thanksgiving break, that is. Welcome back, all the students. Got a couple weeks left for the big winter break. And I'm trying to cook up some good stocking stuffers for those couple weeks. I think we will be taking the show off, but there will be some pretty interesting material coming up for your eardrums. So there still will be good reason to tune in during the winter break. And also wanted to just touch on real quick. Real excited again to be on the air live once again. And just want to shout out, y'all can follow us now on Podbean. We are now uploading some of our content, at least, up onto the Podbean podcast. And again, you can find that on our Facebook page. That's Media Cyphers on Facebook. And we kind of pulled together best of some of our most essential analysis and put it into that particular podcast program. Think of it as kind of a best of when it comes to the show that you listen to here week in and week out live. So today we got a couple of important local follow-ups to stories that we've talked about in the past. Want to spend some time diving into those and giving them their due diligence. One thing I did want to touch on right off the bat, and I'm not going to spend a ton of time discussing it on the show. I don't have much more information than what y'all at home would be able to Google or DuckDuckGo. But the tragic incident that happened last week downtown at the bus station, there was an active shooter situation. 3 individuals ended up getting shot. Details are still pretty murky, although the family of the shooter did indicate that he may have had some mental health issues before the incident occurred. Suffice to say, I think particularly, if I had a co-host on, we could maybe do a little discussion about this, but I think this is something that we have touched on the show before, as far as strengthening local mental health care services, the role of local gun ordinances laws. Sometimes that's more of a point of debate with me and some of my co-hosts, but I think for now, I want to, my thoughts go out to the folks who were victimized and traumatized by what happened at the bus station. It really hits close to home it should hit close to home for any, working class person here in Kalamazoo. I myself, I use the bus from time to time. So the thought that, some given moment could be disrupted by one of these active shooting situations, it's a lot. As we all know, tragically a few years ago, we had the Uber shooter come through town, and luckily nobody was fatally injured this time. Well, except for the shooter. But this is sadly a very this is a part of living in America, as it were. And, to kind of echo the Onion, like, it's the only country where where stuff like this happens. Gee, I wonder what the underlying problem might be. All right. So with that, I wanted to start with a follow-up to a story we've talked about on the show several times, and a lot of you might be familiar with the situation involving graphic packaging and potentially the way that they are polluting, or at least, giving out some nuisance odors over on the north side, which again is a predominantly black and working class neighborhood. But there was a kind of a very big story drop about some potential corruption and bad behavior going on when it came to the investigation of what graphic packaging is doing. And I'm going to be reading from this article from the Detroit News, written by Carol Thompson. This was published on November 26th. But as it turns out, wow, it's almost as if there might be a little bit of corruption going on. And here's my surprised Pikachu face. Talk about that. So let me tell you, let's get more specific, and I'll tell you a little bit about what's going on here. So I'm going to read a little bit from the article and give you some context. The headline is Feds probe civil rights complaint against EGLE over Kalamazoo plant. Federal environmental regulators are investigating a civil rights complaint against the Michigan Department of Environment, Great Lakes and Energy regarding its oversight of a Kalamazoo paper packaging plant and officials' treatment of a local activist. Brandy Crawford Johnson filed the complaint with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency on September 1st. She alleged state environmental regulators discriminated against predominantly African-American neighborhoods surrounding the plant by approving an air permit for Graphic Packaging International last year. The permit allowed Graphic Packaging International to expand despite several reported violations of non-compliance with federal air quality standards, the EPA's response to her complaint states. And I do want to underscore that's something that has been kind of overlooked or swept under the rug in a lot of local conversations and discussions about this. Even you may have tuned in to some contentious city commission meetings, or maybe not. I'll fill you in, where you had commenter after commenter saying there needs to be some sort of accountability, graphic packaging, and the fact that again they are in these reports of non-compliance with federal air quality standards. Yet, City of Kalamazoo continues to pass tax abatements for them, and I think we do get like some a little bit of flowery language about equity and justice, but at the end of the day, the big corporation gets a tax break while people on the north side have to deal with asthma, bad odors, health conditions, etc. Anyway, going on. EGLE is reviewing the complaint and looks forward to participating in the process to better protect environmental justice communities, spokeswoman Jill Greenberg said in a statement. Graphic Packaging International's plant in Kalamazoo produces paper-based packaging for items like cups, cartons, boxes, and food containers. It has occasionally come under scrutiny from regulators. The company began installing 2 boilers before entering approval from the state last year, prompting state environmental regulators to issue a violation notice. The state ultimately approved the company's request for an air permit, allowing it to expand, but required the company to continue monitoring for hydrogen sulfide and shut down a boiler in 2022 to reduce its overall greenhouse gas emissions. Graphic Packaging's neighbors have complained about odors and raised concerns about hydrogen sulfide emissions for the last decade, State Environmental and Health Department said in an October presentation. The state has cited Graphic Packaging 8 times since 2012 for odor violations based on public complaints. Federal air quality monitors did not uncover major hydrogen sulfide pollution during a 3-day survey in May, although they did observe distinct bad odors. Crawford Johnson lived near the plant for almost a decade and in that time experienced severe asthma and burning eyes, as did many of her neighbors. She recently moved to another community. She started raising alarm bells about the plant in 2018, including purchasing billboards referring to her community as a sacrifice zone, which, if you've been involved in any particularly urban environmental work, you recognize the term sacrifice zone, which is basically a way to describe when a neighborhood or populated area, where people live, is put right next to a major source of pollution. On the east side of the state, there's been a lot of hubbub about some of the poorer outlays of the Detroit suburbs and Marathon, and also other parts of kind of the East Michigan corridor and that company. So, this isn't something that is particularly alien to the state of Michigan. There's multiple sacrifice zones all over the map where basically pollution and capitalism meets people, and it does not turn out well for the people, usually in the form of kinds of health conditions that we just referenced and talked about. Going back to the article, last year, she and neighbors filed a lawsuit against the company in federal district court in western Michigan, arguing the company caused noxious odors and particulate fallout, including calcite, dust, ash, and or dirt, to fall on their properties. The company denied those allegations this spring in a motion to dismiss the case. It said EGLE should continue handling oversight issues, not the court. To be clear, GPI disputes that any noxious odors or air particulates are emanating from the facility. Again, that's still under investigation. I'm going to skip down a little bit. Crawford Johnson is frustrated and disillusioned by local, state, and federal agencies' responses to her complaints. She said she is relieved federal compliance officers are looking into the state's oversight of the plant. This made me realize I can't trust any single person who is involved as a leader, a politician, environmental protection agency, whether it be state or federal, she said. People have their own agendas. They should have not looked the other way this long. EPA compliance officers will also investigate whether state regulators retaliated against or intimidated Crawford Johnson last year for allegedly asking her not to file a civil rights complaint against the state. Crawford Johnson said an environmental justice official for EGLE asked her, "What will it take for you not to file a civil rights complaint?" during a Zoom meeting last November. She understood the question as an attempted bribe. I said, "You could give me $5 million right now, and it wouldn't stop me from wanting everything to be fixed, for something to happen, for the residents to be relocated, or graphic packaging to be shut down," Crawford Johnson said. Crawford Johnson filed her complaint with the EPA under the Title VI of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which requires federal agencies to ensure programs receiving federal funding, including states, don't discriminate based on race, color, or national origin. Environmental justice issues can fall within Title VI. EPA compliance officers declined to accept Crawford Johnson's complaint against Kalamazoo County, which she also contends discriminated against the neighborhood when it approved Graphic Packaging International's facility site plan in 2019, because she did not file it within 180 days of approval, which again is the way that the system very much uses bureaucracy to protect itself. So again, if you want to read the full article for yourself, that is from the Detroit News. It was published on the 26th of November. Feds probe civil rights complaint against EGLE over Kalamazoo plants. It was written by Carol Thompson. Again, this is part of a continuing and persistent issue with graphic packaging and the way that they are potentially creating these dangerous health impacts for our fellow working class neighbors over on the north side. Most likely are. Again, it's again, a lot of the actual investigation of some of these health impacts is still ongoing. But at the same time, and I really do want to bring this home, something this article does not touch on is the continued support of our city officials for this company that, again, it's like, oh, well, it brings jobs to the community. Yes, it also is likely making a big chunk of the community sick. And in cases like this, Kalamazoo, again, always likes to think of it as so very liberal, so very progressive. even though we are turning a huge chunk of our community into a sacrifice zone. So again, we will continue following this story as there are new developments, but this just adds another layer of seediness and unseemliness, a story of vague threats and bribes to pile on to the already ethically dubious practice of just polluting and all that. So we're going to go ahead and do a quick break. We will be right back. This is Media Cyphers, only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. Your only source for political revolution on your only station for radio evolution. We are back. This is Media Cyphers, only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. Quick shout out. The background music we use for our show, that comes from Quantum Fleek. Their performance right here in the WIDR studios back in July 20th of 2017. Again, big thanks to letting me use some of this as the background noise. And then we're going to go ahead and do another quick update. This is more of a quick hit, but again, this is another update to a story we've been talking about here on the program. Excuse me. So a quick update for those of you who've been following the Kelloggs strike that is going on, all over the country, but primarily over in our backyard, over in Battle Creek. Solidarity with our comrades out there. Some bad news. The corporation of Kellogg's has decided to hire scabs, basically. So this is just a quick headline story from, I pulled this from Wood TV 8. Kellogg's to replace some striking workers after talks stall. Kellogg's plans to start hiring permanent replacements for some of its 1,400 striking cereal plant workers after negotiations broke down again. The Battle Creek, Michigan-based company said it failed to reach an agreement with the Bakery, Confectionery, Tobacco Workers, and Grand Millers International Union on Monday, so it is moving forward with its contingency plan to keep its plants operating. Kellogg's workers have been on strike since October 5th, and now negotiations are scheduled to resume until the week of December 6th, and that's coming up pretty close. I think it's important to highlight that, Kellogg's, instead of responding to the workers and their very sensible demands, they are now trying to hire up. If you're not familiar with the term scab, basically means when you hire replacement workers to fill in for unionized workers who are not part of a union. While there is strike activity going on, it's seen as very poor practice. It's not very good solidarity. There's also a little bit of a deeper history behind that term. I think that'd be going a little off topic. But, so again, the company isn't backing down. And, the thing about this is, as we did a lengthier piece about this, which actually you can find over at our Podbean podcast. Check that out. Where we dive into kind of how local media has talked about the story, and kind of the hypocrisy of the Kellogg's Corporation, who is making record profits, but can't stand the thought of, some slight increases to pay, and what they're primarily fighting for, which is kind of holding on to their benefits and getting a little bit more time off. You listen to some of these Kellogg's workers who are being interviewed. They're working like 80, 90, 100-hour work weeks. kind of like the catch-all thing you hear is like, well, yeah, the pay is good if you are willing to basically just give your life to Kellogg's. And they felt that in particularly during the pandemic. Kellogg's did not shut down while the pandemic was going on. Their cereal was still being made. There's a lot of working class folks who, we were called essential workers. Not enough of us were given essential pay. It's been a hard year. I myself work in healthcare, and I have been pulling some of those weeks. I think it's part of the reason we've seen we saw Striketober really entrench itself. We're really seeing American labor really asserting itself in a way we haven't in a long time, and I think a lot of that has to do with just the life-threatening conditions of the pandemic, coupled with like the lack of pay, and so something had to give, something had to snap, and with that, I just want to remind y'all, if you want to support the strikers, there's a couple of big things you can do. This comes from the BCTGM website, the union website. 5 things you can do. 1, sign their petition. Let the workers know you're with them. You can add your name to their online pledge. You can join the picket line or drop off food, drinks, and supplies. And the address for the one in Battle Creek is 425 Porter Street. You can send a solidarity letter. You can mail or email letters of encouragement directly to the strike line worker organizers so they can share them with the workers. And they've got a way to download their addresses and emails. You can donate to a strike fund. Strike funds are helping workers meet basic needs and supply their strike lines so they can remain steadfast in their mission for a fair contract. Each location has its own fundraiser managed by organizers directly in contact with the workers. While the BCTGM International Union supports these fundraising efforts, none of them are directly affiliated with the headquarters office. There is a link there to donate directly to the Battle Creek strikers. And, of course, helping spread the word on social media. If you go to their website, there's lots of photos, news articles, there's flyers, all that kind of stuff that you can download. Again, you can follow the strike action on Facebook, facebook.com/Kelloggs Strike. And again, solidarity to the Kellogg's workers. I'm hoping that the company will not be able to. Well, you remember what happened with the John Deere thing? That was so silly. So the John Deere workers who ended up winning their concessions, they tried to fill in a lot of the office workers with people who usually do clerical work and higher ups, and it was just an absolute disaster. So we'll see how that pans out in the context of the workers at the cereal plants. But again, solidarity to the Kellogg strikers, and I for this radio host for one hopes they pull out a win against the Kellogg's Corporation and get the workers get what they deserve. All right, give me just a second here. I think before we transition into another topic, we're going to take another real quick break. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widrfm.org. Just a quick reminder, too, if you want to follow us, you can do that. We have a Facebook page, Media Cyphers. We share out some of the articles and commentary we do. And we also now have a podcast where we take some of the best and most urgent analysis and news coverage from our show and put it into convenient podcast form that you can download at your leisure and listen to while you're on the bus. Maybe you can put that on while you're at the back of the house cooking at one of Kalamazoo's many downtown restaurants. You and the other workers can listen to some truth, etc. There are many ways to listen to the podcast, but yeah, it's our podcast on Podbean, and again, we put that up on our Facebook page as we publish them. Y'all listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR, your only source for political revolution on the only station for radio evolution. Welcome back, WIDR listeners. It is I, your host, Andy Argo, and y'all listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widrfm.org. Your only source for the news that digs underneath the headlines and calls out the establishment on its BS and does a little bit of that critique of the whole capitalist media thing. Anyway, I think the next story we want to talk about, this is kind of transition. We got a couple of COVID stories. Again, this is kind of how it intersects, not only locally, but with workers who, and we touched on a little bit when I was just talking about some of the Kelloggs strikers and the way that working conditions under COVID has really intensified a lot of these grievances and contradictions that workers have to deal with day in and day out. And I wanted to read something. The World Socialist website recently published an article basically doing interviews with auto workers, particularly in the state of Michigan, on how dangerous it is to work in some of these manufacturing jobs in the United States in particular during the COVID-19 pandemic. This article also refers a lot to a inquest or long-form investigation World Socialist website is doing into pandemic and the pandemic in particular, the intersection of the pandemic and issues of the working class. I'm going to kind of stray away from that a little bit, but there was some really important coverage and journalism they did in this article about talking to the workers themselves and hearing from them firsthand what it's been like working in the midst of this pandemic. And that's what I really want to use the program to shed some light on. I am going to read a little bit from here just to kind of establish some context. This is kind of the second paragraph. The headline of the article is Auto Workers Speak on COVID-19 Dangers as Case Numbers Surge Across Michigan and the Midwest. New cases in Michigan, a center of U.S. auto production, have increased 67% in the last 2 weeks, and hospitalizations are up 46%. Worth noting here in Kalamazoo, we have one of the sharpest spikes. At one point, Kalamazoo County was the highest increasing one. I don't know if we are at this moment, but the Rona is around and about. Please act accordingly. I beg y'all. The spread of the virus has been fueled by deliberate government policies, including the lifting of all health restrictions and the full reopening of in-person education, which has the support of the unions and the Democratic administration of Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Schools in Detroit, the largest district in the state, are set to reopen today after student protests over COVID outbreaks and threats of teacher sick-outs forced the district to close before the Thanksgiving holiday. The health danger posed by the full operation of schools and auto plants, both major vectors for the transmission of COVID, are compounded by the emergence of the new Omicron variant, which is potentially more transmissible and deadlier than Delta. In the face of these dangers, the United Auto Workers and the major auto companies have done nothing to protect workers, insisting that it is necessary to quote-unquote live with the virus. A worker at the Stellantis, formerly Fiat Chrysler, Jefferson North Assembly plant in Detroit, spoke about conditions there. There were 2 people on one line today that tested positive and were told not to come in, but this is all word of mouth. Management is saying nothing. One member of the UAW executive board will pull out what he knows on cases for the month, but I don't know how much truth is in it. All Stellantis does is give out masks and put out hand sanitizer. They tell you to submit a survey, but the average person is not even doing that because they are not checking it. What's the point? They've already taken away a lot of the precautions they took for COVID. There's no one taking temperatures. There's not even the illusion that they give a damn about COVID anymore. We go on to talk about, they asked about how they feel about it, whether it should be investigated or not. I think this is particularly telling. I feel there's been a cover-up from day one. There would be an uproar if people knew the full truth. People already feel like there was a cover-up. You have to be pretty closed-minded to think otherwise. There are too many contradictions along the way. They told people to wear masks. Then they told people who were vaccinated they didn't have to wear masks, which is a false narrative. You can still have the same issues as someone not vaccinated. You can't go back and forth with people. It's been, again, a really big way that the U.S. government has fumbled the response to COVID. It's just kind of talking out of both sides of its mouth. As we said months ago, the whole, Biden's press secretary saying, like, we have to go forward, not backward. And it's like, how Trumpian does that sound? It's like, that does not sound like a response informed by science to me. Sounds like it's more like, what is this going to do to my popularity ratings, particularly with all these swing voters who, certainly do exist, I'm sure. Anyway. Asked about the potentially deadly Omicron variant, the worker said, they're trying to force us to live with a virus. It's not realistic. I can't see this going on forever, and they are trying to force this to happen. A worker at a Saline, Michigan Faurecia auto parts plant said, at my job, they did not even let us know when people had COVID-19. You could not even talk about it. If you knew somebody who caught COVID-19 and you told other workers and the company found out about it, they would pull you to the side and threaten you that you could lose your job if you even talked about it. Think about that. It's like you even trying to protect, protect yourself and your coworkers. Get threatened with the retaliation of being fired. Some of our coworkers were out sick and we didn't even know if they had COVID. The company did not want us to know and they would threaten us not to talk about it. They told one of my coworkers that she could lose her job because she was causing panic by spreading false rumors. But it was the truth. They just didn't want us to know. They were sacrificing the health of everyone for the profits of the company. The COVID-19 pandemic does not just affect America. It affected everybody around the world. So we all have to take responsibility for getting rid of it. I was alarmed just to hear how much power and authority the corporations have over human life. They are only concerned about profit. I heard the billionaires just in the United States have increased their wealth by billions, and people are starving. People are struggling. I have to go to work sick because I need my paycheck. I don't have anything extra because of the times we have been laid off. A lot of people didn't get paid. Not unemployment, nothing. Just to underscore that, we talked about this a little bit when the pandemic first started, but I think, most of my listeners, if you are like a worker in America, calling in sick is sometimes a laughable proposition because, very few jobs offer sick leave. The ones that do often require like a doctor's note. And again, if you're not interested in paying a copay or if you don't have health insurance, that's also near impossible. So the idea of taking time off for being sick means that you're going to make less money, and given the razor-thin margins much of the working class has to live on, that may be impossible. It's like, do I go in sick, or do I, if I don't go in sick, then I won't have enough money for rent or groceries or medicine. And that's a bind that most working class people find themselves in the States. So, even many people, we talk about how this would, be a huge factor in I think we predict on the show that like we were going to be living with COVID in the U.S. for a long time. Maybe we didn't predict all of the weird right-wing backlash to COVID measures, but the way that our economy is structured disincentivizes the kind of self-care and common sense health and safety precautions that could prevent a pandemic, and it played out tragically as predicted. Going on, I want to talk another interview with a Michigan worker, 20-year-old auto parts worker in Michigan, said, "I work at a factory where there is no mask mandate. It was lifted months ago by guidance of the state. Very few people still wear a mask, and there's almost no social distancing, which was almost never practiced in the first place. In addition, there is no mandatory testing for workers. When a worker takes their own initiative to get tested for COVID and it comes back positive, the workers are informed by a note on an inconspicuous bulletin board. The note will not identify those infected, and I still do not know if I came in contact with this person at any point. As a consequence, I was denied the knowledge that I was potentially worked near a COVID-positive individual for a week before I found that note. The date listed on the note of the test results was just a day before I visited my grandparents. If I had been directly informed, I would not have endangered their lives. My work environment is the same as that of many around the nation and the world, wholly inadequate and with near abandonment of COVID-19 measures. In effect, my factory operates under pre-COVID guidelines, very much in line with the herd immunity strategy being employed to maintain profit. I do not feel safe in my factory." And by the way, this is just to underscore, I walk around campus and around town a lot. I've been seeing a lot of people, most people I'd even say, are not masking up anymore. And I just gotta re-emphasize, we're going into the winter. There's this new variant, which, when I first heard about it, I thought it was an internet meme. I didn't realize it was like an actual thing. I thought it was like, is it like Omicron? That's not like a transformer or something. But no, it is real and it's serious. And the combination of the capitalist drive for profit and a lot of the wonky denialism that's been fostered through mostly right-wing media and think tanks means we are probably going to be living with this virus for quite some time. And by the way, it's just general good practice to mask up during flu season. Many other countries do it. It never really caught on in America until maybe arguably last year, but then it got turned into a really stupid culture war issue, which is to say a lot of people felt they had have the freedom to ignore grade school germ science. But anyway, I think with that, let's go ahead. We're going to take another quick break. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at WIDRFM.org, your only source for political revolution on your only station that brings you that radio evolution. Hello, WIDR listeners. Once again, I'm your host, Andy, and y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at WIDR, WIDRFM.org. So continuing, we were just talking about kind of the intersection of, working under hazardous conditions in the context of the pandemic. This is another pandemic-related story, which again is it is both local and international in scope. You might already know what I'm about to talk about if you are a longtime listener of the program, because this is again a follow-up to a story that we have talked about a lot on our program, which is to say the resistance of companies like Kalamazoo's own Pfizer to waiving patent using patent waivers so that the vaccine can start being manufactured at a much broader volume and scope all over the world. Again, it really shows that the company is valuing profit over human lives. But again, there has been some grassroots action on this front that I wanted to tell y'all about. This is from Common Dreams. It's an article written by Jake Johnson. It's published on the 29th. 2.5 million nurses demand UN probe into rich countries blocking patent waivers. More than 2 million nurses from 28 countries across the globe filed a complaint Monday calling on the United Nations to investigate the rich countries that are blocking a proposed patent waiver for coronavirus vaccines. An appeal that came as public health experts raced to understand the newly detected Omicron variant. In a detailed letter addressed to Dr. Taling Mofokeng, the United Nations Special Rapporteur on Physical and Mental Health, dozens of nursing unions noted that the end of the pandemic is nowhere in sight as COVID-19 cases continue to soar in numerous parts of the world, while pharmaceutical companies and governments have failed to ensure that critical treatments and vaccines are distributed equitably in order to respond to the pandemic. The unequal distribution of vaccines is not only grossly unjust for the people in low and moderate income countries who remain at high risk for contracting and further transmitting COVID-19, it also provides for the possibility for the development of new variants, some of which may be resistant to the current available vaccines. The filing reads, "The development and spread of new variants poses a dire risk to all people around the world." Also part of the reason why we're looking down the barrel of this Omicron thing that's just discovered. Anyway, the complaint specifically targets the European Union, the United Kingdom, Switzerland, Norway, and Singapore, wealthy nations that have stonewalled the patent waiver at the World Trade Organization, defying the will of a majority of the institution's member countries. Just a quick reminder to some credit, Joe Biden has stressed he would support the patent waiver, but again, with these key countries blocking it, it's good as saying like, oh, I wish. Kind of similar to the whole Build Back Better thing. It's like, oh, if only Joe Manchin and Kristen Sinema weren't blocking this all up, we Democratic Party, we would so totally pass all these social reforms that our financial donors don't want us to pass. Anyway, going on, the petition says, this is a clear violation of our right to health of nurses, caregivers, and patients. So we are now taking them to court. We demand an urgent investigation into the obstruction of the waiver by these COVID-19 criminals. WTO was set to consider the patent waiver once more at its biannual ministerial conference this week, but the meeting was postponed indefinitely due to the spread of the Omicron variant. Coordinated by Global Nurses United and Progressive International, the Nurses UN complaint was submitted as scientists and political leaders worldwide grappled with the potential threat posed by Omicron, the fifth coronavirus strain to be designated a variant of concern by the World Health Organization. First detected in Botswana, cases of the variant have since been identified in South Africa, Australia, Israel, the UK, Canada, and elsewhere. On Sunday, the WHO issued an update noting that it is not clear yet whether Omicron is more transmissible compared to other variants, including Delta. The organization also said there's not yet enough evidence to determine whether Omicron causes more severe disease than other variants or whether it's resistant to existing vaccines. Studies currently underway shortly include assessments of transmissibility, severity of infection, etc. In its complaint on Sunday, the Coalition of Nursing Unions argues that the proliferation of variants is a predictable outcome of rich nations' refusal to distribute vaccines and treatments equitably to the vast majority of people of low and moderate income countries. Nurses and other healthcare workers have been on the front lines of the COVID-19 pandemic response, and we have witnessed the staggering numbers of deaths and the immense suffering caused by political inaction, the filing states. High-income countries have accrued upwards of 7 billion confirmed vaccine doses, while low-income countries have only been able to procure approximately 300 million doses. This has created what public health advocates around the world have described as vaccine apartheid. It is now clear continued opposition to the TRIPS waiver is resulting in a violation of human rights of peoples across the world. The document continues, citing Article 12 of the International Covenant on Economic, Social, and Cultural Rights. These countries have violated our rights and the rights of our patients and caused the loss of countless lives of nurses and other caregivers and those that we've cared for. So I want to bring home a point that I have made on earlier programs, and I just want to hit on it again. One of these corporations that is participating in this vaccine apartheid is Pfizer. You drive around, you see the signs, say, healthcare heroes, hometown heroes, Pfizer, etc. And while the workers who helped distribute and who helped create the vaccine should definitely be lauded, given all the praise in the world, it is those very people who are on the board of directors of Pfizer, the people who are running the company, who have been lobbying and pushing these countries to not sign off on the vaccine waiver. In fact, it was higher-ups at Pfizer who helped create some of the language to protect their quote-unquote medical copyrights, even in situations like this where we have a global pandemic. I want to think of compare it to the polio vaccine. This was developed in the 50s. The creator of the polio vaccine did not see it as a way to make money. He asked, would you patent the sun? In response to a question about whether or not he was going to patent his invention, this vaccine. And you fast forward 50, 60, maybe 70 years now, and unquestionably, the company apparently has this intellectual property rights to a vaccine that was largely subsidized with taxpayer money. I think that doesn't really get talked about enough as well, where a lot of that initial investment into these medical technologies and into the search for a COVID-19 specific vaccine came from taxpayer-funded research. But no, according to Pfizer in particular and all these other companies, it is their right to value their profit incentive over the needs of the people of the world. And as these nurses so articulately point out, the longer we delay in trying to eradicate this around the world, the more these variants will develop and more strains of COVID will occur, and the worse it is going to be for the international community. Again, this whole COVID-19 pandemic has really just been an indictment of global capitalism, the way it values profit over human life, and the way, particularly in the United States, a lot of that capitalist propaganda has seeped in and been gobbled up by a lot of the population into either dismissing the pandemic or, again, falling down. I mean, I guess that's more of an indictment of Facebook when we start talking about that stuff, but at the same time, it's this 1-2 punch of kind of civic disengagement, of polarization, and the way that a lot of the capitalist system actually functions. And it's that's really been the through line through all of these stories we've been talking about when it comes to labor the last hour. Profits above all else, profits above the comfort and lives of workers, whether it's time off, whether it's COVID safety, or whether it's making sure that everyone has access to the vaccine, and not just the rich countries that can afford to pay for and stockpile their doses. So anyway, we're about at the 1 o'clock hour. I want to thank y'all for listening. We still got a lot more to talk about here on the program. This is Media Cyphers. Again, only on 89.1 WIDR FM. Again, you can find us on Facebook. That's Media Cyphers on Facebook. Look us up. You can find the articles that we refer to in the show. And we also have a podcast that we put up. It's kind of a best of our weekly analyses and news bits that we put together. So you can download it off the internet online, listen to as you're walking around, you're on the bus, or maybe you're at work. You share it with your other workers, maybe radicalize them a little bit. Again, we're going to go ahead and just go into a little break. Y'all listening to Media Cyphers only on WIDR Kalamazoo, your only source for political revolution on your only station for radio evolution. Hello, we are back. This is Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. So we've got a couple more stories we wanted to touch on and talk about. This is more going into national and international stuff. So the first one I wanted to talk about, since we've been spending most of the hour hitting on labor stories. So I thought it would be important to give you all a little update about a very high-profile bit of union organizing that was going on down in Bessemer. Some of you may remember that Amazon workers were trying to unionize. Didn't happen, but Amazon did a lot of snaky crap to inhibit their workers from unionizing, and it looks like the Bessemer workers are going to get another chance. So this article is from Left Voice, written by Tatiana Cazzarelli, published November 29th. Headline: Second chance for Bessemer Amazon workers as NLRB orders another union vote. Early this year, workers at an Amazon warehouse in Bessemer, Alabama, fought to unionize their workplace. Amazon used a variety of union-busting tactics, both legal and illegal, to keep the vote from passing. With about half of the warehouse workers participating in the vote, unionization was voted down almost 2-1. Now, 8 months later, the National Labor Relations Board has called for a new election in Bessemer. Coming out of Striketober and with the Great Resignation showing discontent among workers, there is potential for Bessemer and Amazon workers to revitalize the fight for a union in this new election. Stuart Applebaum, president of the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union, issued the following reaction. Today's decision confirms what we were saying all along, that Amazon's intimidation and interference prevented workers from having a fair say in whether they wanted a union in their workplace. And as the regional director has indicated, that is both unacceptable and illegal. Amazon workers deserve to have a voice at work, which can only come from a union. From the outset, the organizing drive was a David and Goliath story. After all, Amazon is the second biggest employer in the country, and the Bessemer warehouse contributes to the company's massive profits through the hyper-exploitation of a predominantly black workforce in a small, overwhelmingly black southern town. Amazon stock increased by 88% since the beginning of 2020, and Jeff Bezos' net worth went up by an estimated $200.9 billion. To continue raking in those massive profits, Amazon needs an unorganized workforce. During the first union drive earlier this year, Amazon invested in an epic anti-union campaign, spending more than $10,000 a day to stop the unionization effort. Workers at the Bessemer warehouse were subjected to countless anti-union meetings, hundreds of text messages, threats, and bribes. While there were anti-union signs in the bathrooms and anti-union messages or meetings every day, there were no mechanisms by which the union was allowed to have that kind of access to workers. Amazon even got the city of Bessemer to change the length of time that traffic lights were red in front of the warehouse in order to thwart the organizers' attempts to reach workers as they drove home. Private security and city police patrolled the warehouse to make sure that organizers were not conducting union business on Amazon property and that the press could not talk to workers. When a few Left Voice reporters took 2 steps on the Amazon property, they were immediately harassed by cops. Further, it was uncovered that Amazon set up an illegal mailbox in the grounds of the warehouse to collect votes, a mailbox that disappeared right after the elections. As one Amazon worker explained, the supervisors most definitely kept telling us about the mailbox on site, so it makes you wonder, did some of those ballots disappear? What happened? And if that wasn't authorized, it makes you wonder, what else did they do that wasn't within regulations, right? These are illegal, repressive measures, so the union rightfully called foul. Amazon cheated and bullied their employees in order to win the vote. Nevertheless, the going on, I'm going to kind of skip down a little bit. In order to win not just a union, but a fighting union, the struggle must be by and for rank-and-file workers. It must be formed on a bedrock of democratic decision-making by workers who lead the struggle, and not staffers, and not even necessarily RWDSU leaders. It must be forged in the unity of struggles between the Amazon workers and other sectors in struggle. In Alabama, there is a need and an opportunity for solidarity between Amazon workers who are fighting for a union and the miners who have been on strike for 9 months to build a fighting labor movement in Alabama. There are many possibilities for unionization and for increased labor actions, as tens of thousands of workers have gone on strike in the past few months and millions have resigned from their jobs. Workers everywhere, in fact, have used the leverage they gained during the pandemic and the reopening to win concessions from their employers. The workers at Bessemer are no exception. In this context, it is possible they could win a second union vote. Anyway, if you want to read the full article, that is on Left Voice's website. It's written by Tatiana Cazzarelli. Again, headline is Second Chance for Bessemer Amazon Workers at NLRB, as NLRB orders another union vote. I'm gonna switch gears real quick. This is just a quick hit. I was gonna talk about it if we ended up having time, but this is not necessarily related to labor organizing. But I saw this in the local paper, and I thought I would bring it to y'all's attention. It's related to loosely, it's related to the Capitol insurrection and some hometown insurrectionaries. I don't know what you call that. Headline is Man Linked to Capitol Insurrection, Threatening Calls to 911 Dispatchers in Michigan Found Mentally Competent. This article lays out some of the implications of that. It's written by Mary Weldmeyer. It was published on MLive November 29th. A man accused of making about 143 harassing calls to Calhoun County 911 dispatchers was found mentally competent. Jonathan Joshua Munafo from Albany, New York, is charged with 2 counts of interstate threatening communications and 1 count interstate harassing telephone calls in the Michigan Western District of the United States District Court. Munafo was found competent and sane when he allegedly made the phone calls, a forensic evaluation found, according to court documents. He spent several hours on January 5th calling Calhoun County's 911 line and threatening the dispatcher that he would kill her and attack her family if she did not put a police officer on the line, the indictment said. He repeatedly threatened physical violence against the dispatcher, the indictment said. And I'm not going to read. There's an expletive-ridden excerpt from that. I'm not going to try to read. Munafo was also facing charges after he allegedly took part in the insurrection at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, court documents have shown. He is accused of punching a U.S. Capitol police officer, using a flagpole to attempt to break windows of the U.S. Capitol, and stealing a riot shield, according to FBI's statement of facts. Munafo faces 10 charges related to the U.S. Capitol attack. He is also being detained by the Federal Bureau of Prisons while the case proceeds. And, again, a guy from Grand Rapids area as part of this. You also see like kind of a through line here. The expletive-ridden calls to 911. He quotes the Insurrection Act. It's this like deadly toxic mixture of toxic masculinity, ignorance, and just entitlement. Like I feel like the entitlement this guy felt to just call a 911 dispatcher over and over again and cuss them out because they couldn't get a hold of a cop, I guess. And of course, the next day going to the Capitol and tearing things up. Again, there's this interesting through line. A lot of these Capitol rioters who they certainly have a lot of bark, certainly are quite vicious when they're traipsing through Congress or when they make these phone calls. But the second they might get hit with consequences, well, they turn into crybabies. I think is a better way to put it. Like when a leftist gets arrested, at a protest or something like that, an uprising, it's just kind of like, it's like, oh, this is what's happening. I better make sure I know who to call, and I have my attorney or legal representation lined up, blah, 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 but yeah, some of these Capitol rioters thought it's like, oh, I'm getting arrested for storming the Capitol and threatening to, kill the vice president and stuff. Which, again, it's kind of there's maybe a little bit of a deeper analysis to it, too, where we talk about, the relationship between law enforcement and right-wing extremists has always been a very interesting one in the United States, in the sense that, and this country has permitted right-wing vigilantism almost since its inception. But these days, you got to be a little bit more subtle about it. And again, it's these folks like this gentleman are kind of being given a spanking by saying it's like, hey, we went a little bit too far with that. We can't rock the boat that much. Again, we talked a lot last week about the difference between how leftists and people on the right are prosecuted for this stuff. I don't think it would be really outrageous to say if this guy was a leftist and doing this stuff, he might be dead already. So again, this guy will be getting his day in court. And we'll follow up and see how this develops if he ends up getting prosecuted or whatnot. But it really does expose too, just these the people who participated in the quote unquote the coup d'etat, as I like to call it, really were mostly aggrieved white people from all over the country, it will be important to see how this develops and what consequences are meted out, because again, 2024 is just around the corner, and historical context. There was the beer hall push before there was a Reichstag fire, which is to say about around a decade before the Nazis came to power, they attempted a coup called the beer hall push, which a lot of people at the time thought was comically inept. And then, in about 10 years, y'all know the history. Anyway, let's go ahead. We're going to go to a quick break. Y'all listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at WIDRFM.org. We will be right back. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. This is Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at WIDRFM.org. Again, source for kind of lefty working class news out of the Kalamazoo area. So I've got one more article I really wanted to talk about, and this is some international news, and it's some good news for a change. Oh boy. This comes from Common Dreams, and headline is Triumph for Democracy. Socialist candidate takes commanding lead in Honduran election. This article does go a little bit into context, but this is a really, if you know anything about the 2009 coup in Honduras, you may understand just how monumental this is. So this was written by Kenny Stansel. It's published November 29th. Go ahead and read from the article here. Leftist presidential candidate Xiomara Castro took a decisive lead in Honduras' election on Sunday, setting her up to defeat the right-wing incumbent party's candidate. Though progressive observers stress the need to remain vigilant as ballots continue to be counted and reactionary forces ramp up misinformation following an apparently unsuccessful attempt to suppress voting. A victory by Castro would represent a repudiation of U.S. intervention in Central America. Honduras' potential next president is the wife of Manuel Zelaya, the country's former progressive president. It's really more of a centrist liberal, but I'll talk a little bit more about that later, who was deposed in a Washington-backed coup in 2009, after which narco-violence surged under the watch of an authoritarian neoliberal regime installed by the Obama administration and supported by subsequent administrations. If she wins, Castro would be the first Honduran president to be democratically elected on a socialist platform, as well as the first woman to lead the country. With just over the half of the ballots processed, the Libre Party's Castro has garnered 53.6% of the vote, compared with 34% for Nasri Asfura, the candidate from the right-wing National Party, which has ruled the country for the past dozen years. So I want to give a little bit of historical context to this article before I continue reading. So there is a very funny irony with Xiomara Castro coming in as this potentially, knock on wood, there's always room for more shenanigans when it comes to these elections that election results the United States doesn't like. So Zelaya was initially deposed in 2009, and I mentioned, he wasn't really like a hardcore leftist. Of course, South America, Latin America has a long history of U.S.-backed coups. 2009 being one of the more recent ones. It's very interesting if you study the coup. Even at the time, there was a sense of disbelief. Like, it seems like such a 20th century thing to do. Thought we were too modern and advanced for something like what happened in 2009 to happen, which apparently was not. And Zelaya himself was largely, like I said, kind of a center liberal person, very much a capitalist unto himself, but he started tweaking around the edges. There's a couple of main sins that put him on the U.S. Empire's radar. He started tweaking around the edges in supporting social programs that did cut into the bottom line of some of the biggest capitalists and landowners in Honduras. So they really did. The ruling class in Honduras did not like that. He was also doing some oil deals with, at the time, Venezuelan President Hugo Chavez, which, again, at that period, Hugo Chavez was persona non grata. So even though such a deal probably made the most sense geographically for getting some much-needed energy to Honduras, presidents from George W. Bush to Obama and so forth very much opposed Honduras having any sort of working relationship with, a country that's basically their neighbors. So again, it was a lot of the U.S. saying, like, do as I say, or ... Again, what is really ironic about this is now we have it close to a little over a decade later. His wife is on the cusp of winning this election with even more outspoken socialist politics than her husband, who, again, was deposed for far less. So, I don't know, you call that karma, you call that the people of Honduras, using the ballot box to, get a little bit of justice. But anyway, let me continue reading from the article. By the way, she is ahead by like 20 points, which is very impressive, and we can hope that that lead stays. Anyway, Castro hopes to restore diplomatic relations with China, legalize abortion and same-sex marriage, and defend the interests of the poor and the working class, according to Telesur. Calling the 62-year-old Democratic Socialist's solid performance a triumph for democracy over corruption and election irregularities, Mark Wiesbrot, co-director of the Center for Economic and Policy Research, said in a statement that Xiomara Castro's likely victory is a testament to the will of the Honduran people to have their voices heard and their votes counted. Democracy remains very fragile in Honduras, Wiesbrot warned. This is a country that saw the military kidnap the president at gunpoint and fly him out of the country just 12 years ago. And there was very strong evidence that the elections of 4 years ago were stolen by the ruling National Party. Indeed, Castro's current lead materialized despite the best efforts of the incumbent right-wing government to suppress participation. Progressive International, whose new Observatory to Protect Democracy sent delegates to Honduras to monitor the election process, drew attention to reports that the ruling National Party was attempting to buy votes. On Sunday morning, Salvador Nasrallah, a former presidential candidate who led Honduras' 2017 election by 5 percentage points, 57% of the votes counted for a 30-hour delay and other technical failures ultimately resulted in the National Party victory, said that the website of the National Electoral Council had been intentionally taken down and that right-wing officials were giving voters inaccurate information about polling places. Hours later, CNE announced that its server had been attacked, which PI said has prevented voters from locating their polling station, causing long lines to form. With polls still open and before a single ballot had been counted, the incumbent right-wing government said on Sunday afternoon that Esfera had won, in violation, Telesur reported, of national electoral law prohibiting the premature claiming of victory before the competent authorities released their preliminary results. So basically, the right-wing incumbent declared victory before any of the results came in, which showed, and currently are showing, a overwhelming victory for their opponent. Journalist Dennis Rigatyuk warned that the party that turned Honduras into a narco-state will be unlikely to relinquish power peacefully. The ruling National Party's alleged vote buying and premature victory claims, along with yet-to-be-resolved attacks on CNE's website, weren't enough to deter hundreds of thousands of Honduran voters from casting ballots for the opposition Libre Party. Turnout was over 60%. Hondurans flocked to the polls in near record numbers to decide the successor of the deeply unpopular current president, Juan Orlando Hernandez, the New York Times reported. Hernandez's presence was palpable at the polls after his government spent the past 8 years dismantling the country's institutions and allowing corruption and organized crime to permeate the highest levels of power. As the election progressed, Castro also declared victory. Once the preliminary tally showed Esfera falling behind by a significant margin, she told jubilant supporters at her campaign headquarters on Sunday night that she would begin forming a government of national reconciliation starting on Monday. "We have turned back authoritarianism," Castro told the crowd in the capital city of Tegucigalpa. "Out with corruption, out with drug trafficking, out with organized crime." Although Castro has taken a commanding lead, it could take days for results to be finalized. In the meantime, electoral observers have emphasized the need to remain vigilant in the coming hours. Earlier this morning, for instance, a Honduran newspaper shared a misleading graph that suggests Esfera is winning even as he trails Castro by roughly 20 percentage points. And it's literally a chart where so it's a bar chart, and his bar is higher. Now, it does say 33.87 to Castro's 53.61, but Castro's bar is lower than Esfera's. It is really funny. Again, it's I guess you're trying to trick people in a very transparent way. So anyway, while Castro's advantage is much larger than the opposition's early lead in 2017, making it more difficult for right-wing forces to subvert the election, The Guardian noted that a close outcome 4 years ago led to a contested result and deadly protests after widespread allegations of irregularities. Not too dissimilar to something that happened in the United States last year. Anyway, according to Telesur, fears of the military and business elite repeating a similar scenario, the one from 2017 in which electoral fraud and manipulation stole the presidency from liberal candidate Salvador Nasrallah, who has backed Castro, gave it to the right-wing narco dictator Juan Orlando Hernandez have until now not materialized, with Honduras proving ready to fight for the integrity of their democratic process in the streets and with their life if necessary, as recent history has shown. As Wiesbrot noted, the U.S. government supported the 2009 military coup in various ways, and so it will be good if members of Congress who favor democracy will make sure that the executive branch here respects democracy in Honduras more than they have in the past. On the positive side, says Wiesbrot, members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus have taken steps to hold the OAS accountable for its role in the 2019 military coup in Bolivia, so there are pro-democracy forces in Congress. The international community, he added, should be on guard and ready to defend Honduras's democratic institutions and the will of its people against any extra-legal efforts to destabilize or overthrow the new government. And again, that is an article from Common Dreams. It was written by Kenny Stansel. Headline, Triumph for Democracy, Socialist Candidate Takes Commanding Lead in Honduran Election. So, again, we all got to keep a close eye on this. We know what the U.S. government has done before, and we as citizens need to make sure that something like that does not happen to the Honduran people again, as best as we can. Anyway, we're going to take a quick little break. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. Your only source for political revolution on WIDR, your only station for radio evolution.